Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Hoops HQ show. Seth Davis along with Andy Katz. Gosh, we've been talking about college hoops. We've been talking about the NCAA tournament, March Madness, tons of transfer portal stuff going on the last few weeks. Obviously, great coaches have joined us. But on Sunday, the NBA is going to hold its draft lottery. I guess it's probably going to be the last time in this particular format because of the big Tankapalooza. That's a subject for another day. But NBA draft is coming up. And so we are going to be joined here in a minute or so by one of the truly great NBA draft experts, Krysten Peek. Andy, there was so much talk during the course of the season about, hey, this is like the best freshman class of all time. I said early on, you're going to have more freshmen drafted in the first round, maybe than any time in history. I don't know if that's still going to be the case, but we have had a very high number of very draftable players, including first-round picks, including potential lottery picks, go back to college in ways that we would never have anticipated even 2 or 3 years ago. So what's your overarching? We got the draft combine is coming up, workout, so there's going to be a lot of shifting and movement. It's all fun to track. But what's the big thing that maybe you're going to be looking at for these next few weeks leading up to the draft at the end of June?
Well, first of all, I would say that this class did meet the moment because there was so much hype about this freshman class, and they delivered during the course of the college basketball season. I mean, they were the best players in a great season where Michigan ends up winning. Michigan didn't have a dominant freshman, but so many other schools did, including another Final Four team in Keaton Wagler from Illinois, who sort of came out of nowhere to sort of the mainstream that covers the sport and sees it. And he's going to be a lottery pick. And that just showed the depth of this freshman class. And look, we're coming off now a rookie of the year in Cooper Flagg, who was the best player in last year's college basketball and also was a freshman last year. And so a couple of years in a row, everything that's been talked about and people that cover it so well, like Krysten, who we'll talk to momentarily, as it comes through the system, they've been talking about the last 2 years of these players coming up, and they all actually met their, sort of what we expected. And so that was great to see. On the back end of it, what you mentioned there, I do think we are going to see, and we already know there's 71 underclassmen that declare, which is, I don't know if it's a record low. It's definitely lower than we've seen in years past. But I do think we're going to see the fewest that I can remember players go back to school after the withdrawal date in late May for a number of reasons. A, the ones that have declared, for the most part, I think want to stay in. I think there are some headline names like Jeremy Fears, who will go back, but he's going to just go through the process, which is natural. But also in this new world, the money isn't there. The scholarships may be there because now you can do 15, but there isn't a lot of money left by May 27th, June 1st for a high profile player to go back to a particular school. And I think everyone knows that. So that's sort of the back end of this draft process that I think is going to be intriguing to watch.
Yeah, it's really, in a lot of ways, the pre-draft season is more exciting than the actual draft itself. By the time the draft comes around, we pretty much know what's going to happen. You and I kind of know what is going to happen in the draft, but if you really want to know who knows everything that's going to happen in the draft, Krysten Peek is going to join us on the Hoops HQ show. Hopefully we have lots of subscribers to hoopshq.com watching us, so I'm sure you've read her articles. I promise you, we're going to keep her very, very busy over these next few weeks because she is the ultimate insider. She actually might work for more people than Andy and I do. So between the three of us, we've got about 15 or 16 different outlets, but that's life in the fast lane. KP, thanks for joining us. Your debut spot on the Hoops HQ show, I promise it won't be your last. Give us a sense, as someone who tracks this stuff as closely as anyone, what happens between now and the end of June with all of this movement and the NBA draft? What's going to be going on in this world, in your world, the next couple of months?
There's going to be a lot of smoke being thrown out there from different teams that maybe necessarily after the lottery falls, they're, kind of targeting this player or this player. And so there's going to be smoke thrown out. I think there's also, we kind of know what the first tier is set. And that's at the top with AJ DeBonsa, Darryn Peterson, Cameron Boozer, and Caleb Wilson. But after that, the storyline is kind of the lead guard lottery with the amount of point guard lottery or point guard freshman one and done players that we're going to see taken off the board. Andy mentioned Keaton Wagler. Obviously, Darius Acuff Jr. had a wonderful year. Braden Burries, Michael Brown Jr., and Kingston Fleming. So that's kind of the next storyline. But in terms of what I'm doing, I'll be in Chicago at the combine with Andy. And then from there, I'll go to different pro days and workouts, just trying to get a grasp of how this whole thing is going to shake out. And I'm excited. This is collectively my favorite group of one and done talent in the last 10 to 12 years. I love this group of talent, and I think there's going to be a lot of productive pros.
One thing, Krysten, I'm curious because you've done a great job at the high school level and working your way up with these players. I remember early in my career, I was doing a lot of that, and I was talking to a lot of these players, and now I'm getting them, further down the road, and I can't get over, how the character, how articulate, how worldly all these players are. When I interview these guys, now when they get to college, uh, I enjoy it, the engagement, and I can definitely feel a change in interviewing, 17, 18, 19-year-olds than I did, a decade ago. What have you seen on the ground level as to why that is the case?
I think what we're seeing is the fact that, NIL has definitely changed the landscape because now players are signing shoe contracts, Nike deals like Tyron Stokes and Brandon McCoy Jr. did this past year. AJ Bonsa, when he was a senior in high school, was also a Nike athlete. So they're having to grow up faster. And to speak about the world and how worldly traveled they are, whether that's playing for Team USA in the FIBA U17s over in Istanbul, which was a few years back, Team USA ran away with that, or the U19 team that we saw in Lausanne, Switzerland. I went to both tournaments, and just seeing the way that these players are getting way more comfortable at a younger age at being an acting professional. I think social media has changed that landscape. Absolutely. NIL has changed that landscape. And when you see someone like AJ Bonsa elect to go back to his elementary school in Brockton, Massachusetts, and announce that he's declaring for the draft, that's a level of awareness that I don't think we've seen from an 18 or 19-year-old kid in a while. And this is the same elementary school where he went back before the season started at BYU and gave away shoes and backpacks as like a back to school initiative. He's gone to Jamaica and done the same thing in his mother's hometown. So just the sense of awareness in terms of what your platform is and being able to just capitalize on that, I think we're seeing players grow up faster than we have in the past.
There's a physical component to that, by the way. These are grown men. I mean, whenever I go to like the Peach Jam, I cannot believe what a high school junior and senior looks like. All right, let's dig in on some of the fun stuff. We're gonna post up Krysten here a little bit. We asked her to give her some list. Now, at the top of the draft, there does seem to be a very, very broad consensus about the order of at least the top four. Her top five are DeBonsa, Darryn Peterson, Cam Boozer, Caleb Wilson, and then Darius Acuff. I want to ask you about Darryn Peterson, who obviously caught a lot of flack over the past season. He was in, he was out, this sort of mysterious cramping issue. Everybody's saying, oh, no one's going to take him. No one's going to take him. Wow. He dropped all the way from number one to number two. And that might have happened anyway. But I do still see residue from that, Krysten, of people saying, or these anonymous quotes, I don't question his talent, I question his competitiveness. How much is there real questioning about whether Darryn Peterson is going to be as good of a pro as he's always been projected to be?
I have zero question or hesitation on DP and what he's going to project as a pro. Just covering him at the high school level. I went to a couple Kansas practices during the preseason. I went to the BYU game where he had 18 points in 20 minutes, and he outplayed AJ Bonsa when it was 1 versus 2, and all of the GMs were there, to watch the game. But I have zero reservations. I do think the full body cramp was real. And then you follow that up with a hamstring issue. And then when you're coming back from a hamstring injury, you got to be able to decipher, is this my hamstring tightening up, or is this the onset of full body cramps coming back on? Because it's never happened to him before. So Kansas erring on the side of caution. Look, do I think that they could have communicated it a little bit better? Absolutely. But I do not question his love for the game of basketball, his work ethic. and his integrity as a player and a teammate. I know he's a great teammate. I know he loves to get in the gym. Those I do not question. I do know that teams are going to really dive into the medical, and that's going to be their main point of emphasis when they're bringing Darryn Peterson in for workouts during the pre-draft process. But everything surrounding him, who he is as a player, I don't buy that at all. And this is a kid and a player that I've known probably longer than a lot of these like talking heads and podcasters that are just reading a little bit too much into it.
Cameron Boozer, this was another sort of ridiculous sort of narrative early on because, Carlos wasn't, and I hate to say the best athlete. I mean, I guess he just wasn't as quick because he's just so big. And Cameron sort of built similar. And as the season progressed, it was just so clear. He's a winner. He can score. He can defend. Doesn't matter whether or not he can win a sprint. And so you've got him, like most people, in that top three. What did you hear? What have you seen in terms of his sort of growth? And maybe he's going to be there anyway over the course of the season onto the draft boards.
It's wild to me that in any other year, we would be talking about Cameron Boozer as the bona fide number one pick in the same sentence that we were talking about Cooper Flagg being the bona fide pick last year, number one overall. He is the most winningest player, him and his brother, the most winningest player in all of high school basketball. 4 state titles, a Chipotle National, 3 gold medals. 3 Peach Jam titles at 15, 16, and 17 U level. That's never happened. He was MVP at the U17 FIBA World Cup. Like, he is just a winner. And then we saw him do that exact thing at Duke this year. ACC Player of the Year, ACC Championship, led the team to a phenomenal tournament run, and Braylon Mullins, if he doesn't hit that shot, maybe we're talking about them cutting the nets down at the end of this thing. But he is a winner. He's a connector. I think his ceiling is that everyone says he has a high floor, low ceiling, and they're calling him a better Kevin Love. I think he's going to be better than what people are saying and calling him, his comp is Kevin Love. I think he's going to be able to come in day one and help any team that gets him in that top 3 conversation win some games. And that's why you saw so many NBA teams, and now why they've had to kind of look at tanking and what it happened this year because of these 4 players at the top. I think AJ's going to be number 1, and then whatever iteration of Darryn Peterson, Cameron Boozer, or Caleb Wilson, it's a win. It's a win.
Yeah, well, I hadn't heard that Kevin Love comp, but guy played in multiple All-Star games, won a championship in Cleveland, and he's still playing in the league. So if he has Kevin Love's career, that's pretty good. All right, let's go to Krysten's top 5 underrated players in the draft. Interesting selections now. We're getting the fun stuff. Dalen Swain from Texas, Christian Anderson, Hannah Steinbach, Jaden Bradley, Arizona, and Morez Johnson from Michigan. I guess some of those still have their eligibility in college, but I do expect all of them, as I'm sure you do, to stay in the draft. Which one of those 5, Krysten, intrigues you the most?
The one that intrigues me the most is probably Hannah Steinbach, just in the sense where, I didn't watch a lot of Washington games. I saw what he did for Germany in Lausanne, Switzerland last year, and just to see his progression. And he's also a name that I'm getting a lot of questions about from NBA teams during this pre-draft process. So he's someone that I'm really curious to see. I think he's going to go higher than people have him slated just mentally on their draft board. So he's someone, I also think Dalen Swain, I'm higher on Dalen Swain than a lot of other people. They're saying, his shot isn't there yet, but I'm not really skeptical on his shot. I also know the talent coming in at Texas. He's going to have his limited ball touches, and what he does as a wing and as a passer. I mean, this is a guy, he averaged 5 assists as a wing, not the primary ball handler, in the NCAA tournament against tough defensive teams. So he's someone that I feel like I'm higher on. And then just down the list, I mean, Christian Anderson, again, played for Germany. We talk about this being a point guard, first round point guard lottery. I think he's someone that is going to be able to impact the game right away next year in the secondary unit. Jaden Bradley, the same thing. He's more slated in that second round, Big 12 Player of the Year. And Morez Johnson Jr., we talk about Cameron Boozer being a connector. Morez was that connector for that Michigan team. And there's something to be said about a player that is just a winner and will do whatever it takes to win. He did that for the U19 Fubo team. He did that at Michigan. I think he's going to be someone that a lot of teams, especially in the back half of the first round, that they have value.
All right, so I want to skip to your sleepers here. And you got Ibuka Corey from Stanford, who had a phenomenal freshman year. He got overshadowed, obviously, by Boozer in the ACC. But the name on here that I'm curious your take on, Daimara. I think you could have made a strong argument that he was the MVP of Michigan's national championship team. I remember, obviously 2 years ago, people were like, oh, Zach Edey, he's too big, he can't play in the league. He was born too late. I look at Mara, I'm like, how can this player not be an impactful player in the NBA? The way he can play at both ends of the court, protect the rim, not just block, but alter shots. And when he gets the ball, how effective he is down in the low post. What are you hearing on Mara? Where do you think he falls in this first round?
When you look at what he did in the progression from his time at UCLA and how he's found a way to get better after every single season, that's hard to do not only as a big man, but also it shows growth and continued growth. And so when you're projecting him and what he can do impactfully in the NBA, there's still room to grow. That's why we talk about players with high ceilings and they haven't plateaued. Daimara is that player. And when you look especially the center position and the players that are projected at the top of this draft, and we'll talk about them after this, there are some lingering question marks, whether that's Jaden Quaintance or Krysten Peek. And so you're looking at Daimara and you're just like, okay, if we want the safe thing and we know what we're getting from him, he's our guy. So in that, middle of the first round to the 20s, I think he's someone that's where we're going to see him slotted on draft night.
Yeah, and he's the type of player who in today's NBA is even more valuable than he might have been, 10, 15 years ago. Okay, our next list is, we don't want to call them overrated. We're gonna call them questions to answer. Once you get past the first batch of picks, most players in this draft have questions to answer. So these are the ones that Kristen flagged for us. Chris Sinak from Houston, Nate Ament, Jaden Quaintance coming off, obviously, an ACL injury is his big question. Isaiah Evans from Duke, and then Cole Pete from Arizona. And Kristen, I want you to start with him because starting to hear just a little bit of chatter that he might come back to Arizona. To me, he was always kind of projected as a borderline lottery pick, maybe even a higher lottery pick. I've seen some mocks that have him, maybe going in the 20s. But that surprised me to hear anyone even suggest that Koa Pete was coming back to Arizona. You think that actually might happen?
I don't think it happens. Come on. No. If you are a projected top 20, top 25 pick, you stay in this draft because as we all know, then you're waiting an extra additional year to get to your second contract potentially. And there's no guarantees. It could have, you could go back and happen what JT Toppin happened and have catastrophic season-ending injury, and you didn't help your draft stock at all. So for Koa Pete, the only thing surrounding him is his size as a big and his outside jumper. And so those are the questions that teams are going to want to see answered during this pre-draft process in order to feel comfortable in taking him in that top 20 range. And, I've known him, he comes from a family of football players. He obviously looks like a football player playing basketball. Seth, you and Andy, I don't know if you were there here in Vegas when,
Oh, yeah.
he had
that game.
Yeah, that game against Florida, kind of like his coming out party. And what I kind of like about him is he's got this chip on his shoulder. He knows what's being said about him, from people like myself or anybody else. And he is out here to prove people wrong. And so he's a hard worker. He's a very smart player. This is a player at age 15. He played up 2 divisions on the 3SSB for Compton Magic and led 17U in scoring. So this is someone who has played up his entire life. He's got the physicality. It's just the shooting and the shot creation as a pick and pop threat at his size.
All right. So can you give us a player or two? Because there's always one of these players that we haven't mentioned that could jump from projected maybe in the 30s into that back part of the first round.
Ooh, that's a good one. The name that I'm hearing questions about is the forward out of Santa Clara. How many players have we seen come through the combine from Santa Clara and completely help their draft stock? And that's Alan Graves. in what he did his freshman year. 6'9", forward, averaged 19 points, 10.5 boards per game. And so when we look every time, Andy, you and I, we go to the combine, and I love the scrimmages because I know someone is walking into that gym, a player is walking into that gym and significantly helping their draft stock over just 4 games. We saw it with Jalen Williams. We've seen it, countless times. There's always one player, and I think Allen Graves could be that player this year.
That's a big storyline to watch at the combine, by the way, because Graves is still in the transfer portal. I know Duke has been hot and heavy on him. I don't know if that's the place for him anymore, based on who they're bringing in. But
well, they had it the same. They had it last year with Cedric Howard. Remember, Cedric?
Oh yeah, that's right.
He was committed.
Can you imagine
to
if
Duke.
Cedric Howard was on Duke last year? By the way,
my gosh.
Think about that.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, that's a great name for everybody to watch. So no, again, to me, we just had the NFL draft. Like, the draft is all about hope, and so all of these NBA fans, I'm a long-suffering Wizards fan. So, based on the team's history, they will get the lowest possible draft pick, even being in the lottery. But yeah, the draft is all about hope and intrigue and gossip. And Krysten said something interesting at the top, which is that she's going to be hearing a lot of smoke. I always say we get lied to a lot as journalists. We never get lied to more than in these next 7 weeks. So,
Seth, I got one quick one for you. I got to get Kristen's opinion on this one. There's one name we've talked about on this show with this assumption he's coming back, and we don't know. Krysten, what do we know about Ruben Chinyelu?
Oh, I don't know. That's a 50-50 toss-up.
Yeah,
I think he's coming back?
Well, that's what that I think is going to be, going into this process, one of the bigger unknowns. Does he, have a month of May where he hears the right things? Maybe he doesn't. So he's an intriguing name, I think, to watch in the month of May, because it really does affect what happens, at Florida come next season.
And I really I like when players go through this process and test the NBA waters and they get the feedback from NBA executives and front offices. I think it makes them better going into next year's season, so they have stuff to work on, and also more confident when they're actually coming out and going through a draft year. You kind of know what to expect, and you got a little something under your feet before you have to be thrown into the sharks.
Well, so many storylines to follow. Krysten, needless to say, keep your bat phone handy. I know you're going to be cranking great stuff out for Hoops HQ and joining us on the show and tracking all this as we get move forward to draft day. So for Krysten Peek, I'm Seth Davis. And thank you, Andy Katz, as well. Thank you, everybody, for watching us on the Hoops HQ show. As always, I encourage you to go over to hoopshq.com, subscribe. You can read all of Kristen's NBA draft coverage, plenty of articles from me and Andy as well, and a whole staff of writers as we pivot towards the NBA draft. So for Andy and Krysten, I'm Seth. Thanks for watching, everybody.